welcome back to the Unbiased Opinion, where everyone's opinion is biased except ours. I'm Daniel.
I'm Craig, and that other guy
And
is
we
not
don't,
here. Thank
yeah,
God.
he's a loser. But today we'll be covering the first two Star Trek films in the original series, Star Trek film series. So, Star Trek the Motion Picture, as well as Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. No, we will not be discussing or comparing them to the disgusting J.J. Abrams remix or whatever those are. But
Thank God.
starting with Star Trek: The Motion Picture, came out in 1979. This was after a hiatus from the original series, which ended in '69. So about 10 years. Um, And Craig, what did you think of Star Trek: The Motion Picture?
I actually liked it. I remember I saw it, I've seen it one time before this, and I fell asleep. So I had to try to do it in two different settings because I fell asleep. People call it the motionless picture. I can see why. But second time around, knowing what I was in for, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of we'll get into it a bit later, but there was a lot of stuff behind the scenes and that came like with production and making a movie. Some issues
Oh, that'd
with
be
like
the whole
some of the
like little thing,
cast.
like the whole ever since it got canceled to the movie, like that whole 10-year gap.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole ordeal with it. Some of the script, some of the actors, namely Leonard Nimoy. And yeah, but I before we get into that, initial thoughts, I enjoyed it. There are some flaws with it, some obvious ones, which we'll get into, but I enjoyed it for the most part. I think initially, like when I was watching it, it feels like one giant Star Trek episode, and we should preface this by saying, um, you and I are both big fans of Star Trek. Um, we'll take Star Trek over Star Wars, but
Easily.
we both have, for point of reference too, we both have watched the original series, so coming into this, we knew like what to expect and everything. I actually, fun fact, I actually before I ever watched the original series, I watched the movies first because my dad, he was a huge Trekkie growing up. So when I was younger, I watched the movies first. Then I later watched the original series. So we were watching these. It was a bit different, but with positives. What Actually, we should probably just get into the background of it.
Yeah, because like
What
again,
had
like it,
happened with
yeah, 'cause
what
that
happened
show
with
that
this.
got canceled in '69 after 3 seasons. It continued to
Yeah,
act as a animated show for another 2 seasons, but no Chekhov. Which I
yeah,
actually never saw the animated show. I had absolutely zero interest. It's like,
yeah. I
yeah,
didn't either.
I could
I
skip
didn't
that.
either.
It wasn't long. I think it was only like 30-ish episodes the whole 2 seasons, but like I cannot care any less to see it.
Yeah, but Roddenberry, after the show was canceled in '69. Well, the original run. The interesting thing with it is Star Trek wasn't as popular when it originally got released. Then once it got put back on TV for reruns, it picked up. It got a lot of momentum, and that's where it kind of became like a cultural icon, a cult classic.
Yeah, like a lot of like
And
sci-fi
then
conventions were based on Star Trek.
yeah, and then Gene Roddenberry, who created the show, he had lobbied for Paramount to, get the show going through a feature film, and eventually they began working on it. They began working on a script, like in the film and stuff, like in '75, and then in '77 they started doing the script, and it got scrapped.
Well,
Um,
wasn't it before there was like it was like Star Trek Phase 2, that was like the sequel series, right?
yeah,
Which
yeah,
never came to fruition, but I know they use a lot of stuff for like TNG, like a lot of
yeah,
scripts for those episodes and like the character, even for the movie too, the
yeah.
motion picture.
Yeah, and then it originally what kind of got it going, because up until that point, It was with Star Wars was like the big hit, like when it first came out, and then like the Close Encounters of the Third Kind became a success. So that kind of convinced Paramount that they could, that this might be a good idea.
Didn't that
Um,
also have Leonard Nimoy in it? Close Encounters.
no, that was Richard Dreyfuss.
Oh, what am I thinking of? I'm losing it.
um, but yeah, so that kind of happened, and then there was the whole so once they got everyone through, once they, started getting the thing going, there was the issue with Leonard Nimoy, who originally wasn't going to come back. Um, and the studio was going to initially push it through without Spock. And then, fans and everyone else was like, yeah, no, that's not a good idea.
Well, yeah,
You
because
need
like the two
Spock.
biggest stars were Spock and Kirk, and their
Yeah.
dynamic. I mean,
Yeah.
you could just leave them out.
Yeah. And that's also half of like McCoy's comedy is him and Spock going back and forth with each other. So you need the three.
Oh yeah, I
But
mean, I
you,
think you need all three. Like, I
yeah,
don't.
exactly.
A lot of people now like Bones is like easily the least forgotten out of the three of them. But, like to me, they're a trinity, not a duo.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But yeah, who's gonna fill his place like Sulu? But so yeah, so what happened was, and part of this I found out from watching that documentary, was it The Life of Spock? I told you about. They're talking about it in depth with Leonard Nimoy, and what happened was is after the cartoon got canceled and it'd been a while. Paramount they owned Spock as a character. He was their rights, so they were making money off of Spock with like ads and stuff. And Nimoy saw that, and he wasn't getting paid any like gratuities on it, so he actually sued them. And then the movie, they're in progress, in works to get the movie going. Um, and then they eventually, then they realized like they need Spock in the film, so they eventually came to an agreement. They settled it, so Spock comes on. Then the script comes, and you find out later that a lot of them had issues. Kirk had issues with the script. I think McCoy had issues with the script. Nimoy had issues with the script. Um, and there are other characters, but and that I think is a good segue into why this film gets called Star Trek: The Motionless Picture. Um, Which, see, the thing about this film, and it's a downside. It's kind of a double edged sword, right? Because this movie comes out. One of the things about the original series that, um, that was a good and bad thing for it is it always was limited by the budget and the technology of its time. So they had to get creative, and sometimes the set designs on the original series were pretty cheesy and bad, which you kind of love it for. And some of the costume designs were limited by their budget and by their
Also, too, like
time.
I
So
heard stories where like episodes were based on like, oh, a movie just finished filming, we could use the set and like the costumes for this episode and make an episode about it.
yeah,
So they were really, running things.
yeah, and that's why a lot of the times, like in the original series, like you look at the Klingons, like they would just give the actors a spray tan and give them like a Fu Manchu. That was the difference between the Klingons and the humans, and they would have more about the costume look. And the Romulans didn't look any different from the Vulcans, like
Yes,
at
before like their
all.
extra like
Uh,
forehead thing in Next Generation.
yeah, yeah, and their way around it was saying that the Romulans were a evolutionary offspring of the Klingons, not the Klingons, the Vulcans. That was their way of like passing it off. So um, so so when this movie came out and they finally got like a really good budget, for it, they pushed heavily on like CGI, and and then also you have to keep in mind too. Star Wars came out, the CGI, all the space battles, and it was a huge thing. So I don't. I don't like when I watch the film. I'm not mad that they really pushed the CGI and the big shots of the Enterprise, but the problem is and and when you look at what the actors were complaining about, the script is like this didn't feel like a Star Trek film, and I think that or like maybe from Star Trek, and I think that's true. and I think that's also because they didn't care. Maybe because of the CGI, they didn't care to fill out like a good script. Like there was more about like I was thinking about this like when I saw it, and I was like, this felt like someone got like a really cool toy, a really cool car or something. They got this really cool like object, and they just wanted to show it off to you. And that's what like to
Well,
me like
especially like
this
that
film.
shot, like in
Oh
the
yeah,
5 minute shot of the Enterprise. I mean, I felt like that they finally had a good model of the
yeah,
Enterprise or the like a physical model, and they were just like
yeah,
so proud of it.
yeah. And don't get me wrong, the C the CGI and effects kind of hold up for its time. Even today, like it was still I was still impressed by some of the stuff that they were pulling off.
Oh yeah, it does look
But
good. It's just like what you're
yeah,
saying.
it's just it was too much of it. And in that documentary, The Life of Spock, Nimoy made a good point because he didn't like the first film at all. And I can understand why. But he said the thing, it felt like they were focused so much on the visual effects rather than telling a good story, and that isn't the essence of Star Trek. Yes, you want a good balance of cool sci-fi, stuff and good fights and stuff, but Star Trek was about the crew. It was about the people. And I think that was something with the original series what made it awesome was that they had to focus on the people. They had to focus on developing good characters because they were limited by the budget of their time and the CGI. So I completely understand that. And Bones, even DeForest Kelly, he said the same thing. Like the script didn't feel like that. But um, with that, um,
Because I'm afraid too,
the
like how you're saying, like it feels like undercooked. That's why I feel like it's like a long TV episode.
yeah,
Because most TV, the TV episode, like the characters don't change much between episodes. Like that's why, like with sort of Spock, none of the characters really changed. It was just like a TV episode. There's this event, they dealt with it, and that was the end of it.
yeah.
Except for like
Well,
sort of Spock, not really.
yeah. That was another thing too. But before we do that, Craig, do you want to briefly explain the plot of the film?
I mean, it's really simple. There's this unknown entity approaching Earth. They don't know what it is, but slowly over time, they're trying to be peaceful, trying to cooperate with it. They slowly figure out that it's the Voyager 6 probe from Earth, and then it's trying to find its creator and trying to find purpose in life because it was given
Yeah,
the ability to gather. I mean, that's not important, but like that was it. They're just dealing with the Voyager 6 coming back and looking for its creator.
yeah. And and also, which I was surprised by this choice that they did with this was they decided to make this about 3 years set, uh, 3 years after the original series had ended.
Oh, really?
That's when this film was supposed to take place. Because they mentioned to Kirk, the Decker said to Kirk at one point, he goes, "You haven't been a captain for 3 years."
Okay, because well, is it? I think it'd be technically 2 years after the animated series, but
Yeah.
whatever.
So what happened was, yeah, and that's something too. We'll get into when we talk about Wrath of Khan. Certain stuff gets retconned in these first two films. Specifically in Wrath of Khan, we'll get to that. But I was surprised too, and I think Wrath of Khan made a good choice to retcon that decision with the timelines and stuff. Um, but um, yeah, um,
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, if you
and
get
also too,
admiral, that's pretty quick. I mean, usually you have to be, I think the rank is like commodore, rear
yeah,
admiral, vice,
yeah.
then admiral. Doesn't matter,
Yeah,
but
so yeah, Wrath of Khan they retcon that, and I think it was for the better. We'll get to that, like what happens with that, um, and so yeah, with the plot, it's pretty simple. They said that the predecessor they said for this one was the Changeling episode, um, with the with that one satellite that got caught in a black hole, and it thought Kirk was its creator when it came back, and it like merged with another machine, and it was like seeking out to destroy like any inferior life form. It was looking for like perfect life forms. Do you remember that episode?
yeah, it's like they kind of reuse this concept a few times because there's another movie with this similar concept.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I think we should get into positives for this film. What did you like about it?
I mean, it's like a typical Star Trek. I like the sci-fi aspect of it. Obviously, special effects were great, but that's it's not like again, like it's not like it's bad. It's more on the boring side, especially like 2 years after Star Wars came out.
Yeah, and that's the thing too is I would have, and I agree with you. Like those are about the only two like positives for it, and when we get into the negatives, this isn't a bad film. It's just disappointing, and it also too like the movie itself was a box office letdown. What they were expecting for it to make on it, they didn't.
Boy, they're having like
That
Star Wars numbers. Like we got the other sci-fi franchise, right?
yeah, and so yeah, I thought the visual effects are great, overused but great. And the thing is too is like I would say um, the thing that probably saves the film for the most part is obviously the crew and their character interactions, but not as much. I guess just getting into the negatives. Um, I think the thing that like we were saying, this didn't necessarily feel like, and like what the actors were complaining about the script is, it doesn't feel like a Star Trek film, or like it didn't like feel like an essential one where the characters they felt like out of place.
And kind
It
of
didn't. It
flat
didn't feel.
too, because I feel like you didn't get those
Yeah,
interactions you got in the TV show.
yeah. So because Kirk was admiral, and then he's coming on. He just takes over the ship from Deckard. That poor guy. That guy got demoted and then handed double work. Spock
Can you
is
do that? Like, can you just like? Because usually when that happens, I feel like when in there's actually an episode. I think his father. Remember, it was the Commodore Decker trying to destroy that evil space destroyer thing. He like demote Kirk. He just said, I have the ranking. I'm senior authority. I'm taking control of the ship." Like you don't have to
yeah,
demote somebody. Like Jesus, like he really was trying to screw with them.
yeah. I was laughing too because then he got Kirk demotes him, and then he gets double the work because Spock isn't there, and the science officer that was supposed to be there died in the transporter malfunction. So
I
this
was like,
poor guy was getting yeah,
well, like,
and
why
that
bring
and
the
that
transporter actions? Like, what was the point of that? Like, I guess the ship isn't fully ready, but like, whatever. Am I going to kill the guy?
well they just they need to kill him off to get Spock on the ship, which I don't. It, and that was weird too. I like why Spock was on Vulcan to purely rid himself of logic when like he already had chosen the Vulcan way. And up until that point too, like if you're just going right after the like original series, and I'm sure the cartoon didn't really change much, but Spock, like this wasn't like J.J. Abrams Spock where it's like he's emotional every other 5 minutes and he's like struggling with it. Like Spock kept his emotions under control for the most part. Like there were maybe a few, like at most 3 episodes in the original series where, under normal circumstances, actually there was only one I can think of where he lost his emotion for a second, and it was when he thought in Amok Time when he thought he killed Kirk,
Yeah,
and
Jim.
Kirk was like, Jim. Like that was the only time because all the other times Spock showed emotion in the original series was like he was under a mind control or
Yeah, like
um
it was a Pon
some
farm.
alien, yeah, upon far, and or like that one the spore episode where they went to that planet and the spores were like taking over people and giving them like this feelings of ecstasy so the spores could live within them, and like Spock was having that the romantic interaction with the one lady on the planet. But that was because the spores were in his body, and Kirk then had to like get him to be a little emotional to get them out of his body. Like that was it.
Yeah.
So I was a little like I was a little confused as to the choice for that, like why Spock has to rid himself of any emotion. Like he already kind of had chosen that, and up until that point, he did a pretty good job with it.
Also, too,
Like
like
I,
he was trying to, I guess, dedicate himself to the Vulcan way, but like I don't remember really in like the original series where like there was like this conflict where like he was like thinking about leaving Starfleet. I mean, I think there may be like maybe an episode. Like he really wasn't
yeah,
like torn on staying with Starfleet. It was like he was pretty dedicated to it.
yeah,
I mean, his dad was
he,
an ambassador or whatever. It's not like it doesn't run in
yeah,
the family. It's not like it's against the Vulcan way.
yeah. I know his dad was a little like disappointed, like he to go on the ship. I guess he wanted him to do a more diplomatic role, but it wasn't out of the question that Vulcans were heavily involved in Starfleet at all.
Yeah.
They were one of the main races in the Federation that helped set it up. So um so that was a little weird, like Spock being at a like not there. Maybe if he was like in like more of like a more teaching or administrative role, like the higher up rank you go, the less you're involved, kind of like how the military and Navy work, like you're more than in a general role, like where you're making decisions behind a board, not necessarily involved,
Well, kind of like how Kirk
and
is in the
everything.
next movie.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and also, so that was a little weird. Bones retired, or like I'm trying to think, like he said like he would never go back on a ship or he would never go back in the field when he first came on the
Yeah, and she looks
on.
like a real 70s hippie.
I did laugh at that part where like Bones was supposed to get you know supposed to get beamed up with that one group, but he stayed behind because he wanted to see if they would get scrambled, if their molecules would get scrambled, and then he just immediately as soon as he beams on, he's just angry at Kirk for like pulling him back in it. Um, but yeah, so
But then he does
and
nothing
then
after that. He just like he tries to like bicker with Spock, and then nothing really happens.
yeah, yeah, that was the thing. Like they it just felt like the crew didn't have like too much to like really do in this, and that's where again like the main complaint is the script was pretty weak. Like it was all about like, oh, here like this 10-minute shot. Oh my god. Not even that. It wasn't just that 10-minute shot of Scotty and Kirk going on the shuttle to the Enterprise. That I mean, that was ridiculously long. But this movie, the main that should have been like a main negative was the pacing. Like,
It's
like
usually slow.
yeah, it felt like it was only 2 hours and what 15 minutes. So it probably was about 20 minutes longer than every other movie in the series, but it just felt like 3 hours. And like because so to clarify, we both watched the director's cut.
Yeah, because I was trying to find the original, but I'm not gonna pay for it, and I think it was HBO Max, so I was like, I'll watch the director's cut. Same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, because even the opening, it was just like I thought I was like losing my mind because the
I thought my
opening was
Roku
just like
froze. I was like, what? Is something wrong? Like, why is it a black
yeah,
screen?
yeah, because even in the opening, like it literally shows like space and then it just keeps going for
Kept
like
going.
for like it was like 2 minutes. I was like, I literally like was like, do I think freeze? Like it's just music playing. I'm like, it's like, are they trying to like put you in a trance to get you through like the week like script? Like, oh, like,
Well, see,
um,
my volume wasn't loud enough because I really thought it froze.
yeah, and yeah, and then and then it was just like every like shot or like every scene, it just felt like it took too long. Because even the opening with the Klingons when they came across V'ger,
And the new
um,
design.
yeah, like it just they were showing that off. That felt long, and then like they're showing V'ger, and like it just like everything was just so slow moving, and then um like that doesn't help is like and then when you're introduced to all the original crew, everyone is out of place. Now it's like now they're just it's like we're half the movie is just them, we're reassembling the crew, and then you know, and also too, I guess another thing too with V'ger is like, and then when you compare it, I'm only gonna say the fourth one just for a point of reference, the difference, and like I guess too, and with Khan, like the thing with V'ger is it was a huge threat, but the difference like with this one, and you think of like the fourth one because it's a very similar concept. Like the fourth one, it's like the threat is here now. So it's like we gotta scramble. The crew's out of place. We gotta get everyone back into place, and
Yeah.
we gotta kickstart we gotta kickstart our solution. This one, it was like V'ger's taking its time.
And not
And
even
it's
still,
like
like, it's not even doing anything that bad. It just blew up two Klingon ships. I mean,
yeah,
right,
I
it's not
mean
like it, you know,
in
it
our space.
destroyed the planets.
Yeah, and so it's like the threat was like it was like they didn't do a good job setting up the threat, or like, or I should say they didn't do a good job of like a sense of urgency. And that's where like the pacing of this film, it's like because oh, this thing's coming, it's going to be at Earth in a couple days, and it's like we get the crew on the new Enterprise, they spend like 40 minutes like getting the crew onto the ship, doing the long shot of the ship, and then it's like, oh yeah, we're here, and now the bigger problem is the Enterprise is having issues. Now that's fine if the modifications of the Enterprise are causing issues. It got revamped and everything, but the thing is V'ger is like there isn't like a time pressure that's putting, like it's not like they had to, like the V'ger is going to be here in 10 hours and they have to send the Enterprise out half functioning,
Yeah.
and like then and then it allows for the crew to like like the typical Star Trek stuff, like where they're at a disadvantage and they have to think, and then the crew has to work together. It was like, yeah, we fixed the ship, some Vulcan guy got melted in the transporter and Spock's back. All right, we're good to go now, because that's what it felt like. It's like, all right, we had these guys set up, we killed them just so we could get Spock back on the ship, which he really should have never left, and we're good.
Also,
Decker
to your
gets
point too,
demoted.
like it's your point. Like I know they do reference the time a lot, but like this is the problem, I guess, when it's a little more realistic. Like what their time frame was probably very realistic. Like it's going to take days to get there, right? You're going to know about these things ahead of time, but it doesn't make for a good movie.
Um,
But also too, like what they said, like we've got like tons of time before it gets here, and they said oh no, there's a ship in the sector. I'm like I don't believe that for a second. Maybe there's not a ship in the sector, but they couldn't get there in time. I'm not buying that.
all right, so just so we don't lose track, you said you were talking about it gets super, like this problem where it gets realistic. Just to
Y-
pick back up.
Yeah, like, that's where it gets realistic. Like it's gonna take. They're gonna know about it ahead of time, and then it can take days to get there. Like they have long range satellites and sensors and stuff. The other thing too is like if
Yeah,
it takes that long to get there, I don't believe for a second that you can get another ship over there in time.
yeah,
Like
and
as you
that's
say
the
with Star
thing.
Trek 4, like it's a now thing. Maybe ships aren't there, or ships are there and it's not helping.
Yeah,
You do it right
and
now.
and that's where we talk about it's not the essence of Star Trek. Like a lot of the episode, like especially in the original format of an episode, like they don't have time to like draw things out. So like, and that's where I understand where the main cast had issues with the script, was a, and a lot of it was they would be they go visit a planet, they do shore leave, or they're just going through space and they come across another ship, they run into it and immediately they get thrown into the situation. So that was a bit different, like where they don't immediately throw them into a situation, and then it allows for the crew to play to the strengths of the crew, like Kirk and then half the crew gets separated, that they're on the planet dealing with the people down there while while the rest of the crew's on the ship working together to so you didn't really have that, like the crew was together for the most part, and it was just,
And you get another
oh
banter.
yeah, yeah, it's just, oh, here's our upgraded ship. And like, and the thing too is like, into that logic, if we're going to be realistic about it, if the Enterprise is undergoing a revamp, why is there no other ship ready, because knowing that the Enterprise is under modifications?
Yeah, they have at least a
So
few ships ready for Earth's defense.
yeah, but yeah, and then I also thought too that the that little romance between was it Aaliyah and Decker was not necessary,
I
just
mean,
to kill her.
well, I think even as characters, they weren't necessary because, again, like you said, she just
Yeah,
shows up to get killed, and she's running around bald as a probe, and then Decker's there just getting screwed over by Kirk.
yeah. And then and then he falls in love with like her, the
Like it's
probe version of her, and it still has her memories, but
like they were a
like it's
thing
fighting
before.
itself.
Mm.
Yeah, and yeah, so it was just, and that another thing about it being long, I was getting so bored in the middle of the movie when they when they entered V'ger, like they got through the cloud, like the plasma cloud that was surrounding it, and then it's like, dude, I I, I should have counted how long these shots took, because when they were going through the ship of V'ger and they're getting to the heart of it, like my god, like how many components were surrounding V'ger? Like it like half like half that big chunk of like the third act, or like second and third act, was just shots of them going through V'ger and like the different parts of V'ger
We finally
and
have a
stuff.
budget.
Yeah, it was like, and that's why I felt like it was like felt like someone was showing off like a brand new car. And it was like, it was more about the script servicing the effects rather than the effects servicing the story and the script and the characters. And also too, another thing about this film which I did not like was the costume
I was gonna make a
upgrades.
joke saying that if they should put more money in the costumes instead of the special effects because yeah, great, the costumes were terrible.
Oh, 100%. And funny enough, right? I was reading up on this, like with some of the complaints, um, and I'll just pull up some quotes.
Because I mean, if you've never seen them, the original series, it wasn't like a full military outfit, but like there was a uniform. You could tell who was where. You could tell rank pretty easily. These just
Yeah,
look like someone pulled out like pajamas. Like I can't tell anything about it. Like the visual clarity is terrible.
yeah. And funny enough, right? And they definitely made modifications to the costumes for certain reasons, specifically with the female characters. Because in the original series, the women would wear skirts, not not that lengthy of skirts.
It was
Um,
the '60s, man.
so yeah, and it's funny. So I read this up, right? I was reading up on this. Nichelle Nichols, who plays Ahura, this is on the wiki page too. Nichelle Nichols noted in her autobiography that she was one of the actors who opposed the new uniforms added to the film because the drab unisex look wasn't Ahura. Even
See,
she had a problem with the costumes.
well, see, I'm curious. Like, who actually liked it? Like, is any actors
I
like? I
didn't
mean, I
like.
guess it was comfy.
Yeah, but it was just weird seeing like Kirk, like he just came out of like playing racquetball with Bones to come back to the ship, to the to the helm, like that was just weird. So
Because I like the visual clarity of like, okay, blue is like science and medical, red is command and engineering, and no, red is engineering and like other stuff, and
yeah,
then yellow is command. And then Kirk had that
mhm,
special green one, but then that was like inconsistent. When you could tell, the armbands, that's the rank. Like with this, like it's kind of hard to see.
I don't know.
I didn't like it.
Yeah, the costumes were not good. Um, and also too, like with the script, apparently there was a lot of rewrites to it. It said Nimoy was dissatisfied with the script, and his meeting with Kattensberg, one of the writers, led to an agreement that the final script would need Nimoy's approval. That's never good. Um, DeForest Kelly Bones, he had reservations about the script, feeling that the characters and relationships from the series were not in place, which is true. We were talking about that. Everyone just felt out of place. Along with Shatner and Nimoy, Kelly lobbied for greater characterization, but their opinions were largely ignored.
Well, because
Oof.
even Kirk and Neem or Spock, they understand that it's a trinity, not a duo.
Yeah,
Which you can clearly tell by like the movies they directed and wrote. Like they understand the concept. Like very few actors actually understand uh
yeah.
their characters. Like Patrick Stewart doesn't really understand Picard. That's for a different
Hmm.
rant.
Speaking of other issues that the some of the cast had, because even Walter Koenig, Chekhov, he stated this may be Star Trek, but it isn't the old Star Trek. The actor was hopeful for the film, but he admitted he was disappointed by his character's bit part.
Because what he really
Um,
doing? He just like launched the vessels and got electrocuted.
yeah, that was about it. He didn't. He really didn't do much.
And
They
Sulu
kind
like
of they kind of sidelined a lot of the main cast, for Deckard and Ilya's weird romance and past. Like that's what I mean. Like you don't need Deckard. You don't need. Aaliyah, like they could have had they literally could have had like the V'ger communicate with them some like honestly they could have had V'ger like obviously Spock did the mind meld, but they could have like after that they could have like figured out a way like you don't need the probe the female probe to like fuse with Decker and like it was weird that Decker just wanted to do that. Like, dude, you're gonna get like he essentially was like fusing with some random thing. Like
Which
he
just
just wanted to do
creates
this.
new life.
Yeah. Um Also Takai, his autobiography, Takai described the film's shooting schedule as astonishingly luxurious. Okay, but
What
noted
is that
that the
wasted
frequent
time like shooting the same thing for like 10 minutes? Like you don't just sit there and
yeah,
pretend you're working.
yeah. I just picture like the cast is just standing around as like the director is just like doing like shots of the toy of the model just for like 3 hours while they're like rewriting the script. Um, but noted that the frequent script rewrites during production usually favored Bill, referring to Shatner.
You know, his ever-growing hatred towards Shatner always seems to amuse
Yeah,
me.
I didn't want to get too much into it, but I guess we can go on a bit of a side tangent with this. But I mean, it's relevant to the films. So anyone that follows Star Trek,
At least the original
um,
cast.
yes, knows that I up until this point thought it was a two-way feud, but I'd watched some interviews, I'd followed, and I did some research. This was a completely one-sided thing. So there was always the concept or the story that Shatner and Takai didn't like each other, they didn't get along. Um, but the more I don't know if you've looked this up too as much, but if you've watched like so Takai his whole life had been talking about had Shatner, being the big, the head honcho, having an ego and everything, and and him and Kirk, him and Shatner didn't get along. But I've watched interviews with Shatner, and like Shatner, it was under the impression from Shatner's point of view, him and Sulu barely talked, and they weren't really ever friends or anything like that. So Shatner's like, I never knew the guy. Um, so how much of that, but it definitely, but Takai always throughout time, anytime he had an opportunity, would always take a shot at Shatner. Um, like he had this ego and everything, which I can see that, but also Shatner was the main. He was the captain,
Well, I was
and
gonna say in Takai's defense a little bit. I mean, it wasn't just him that didn't like Shatner. Like most
yeah,
of the cast didn't like him. But I think over
yeah,
time they kind of just like, you know what, this was kind of silly because they never like maybe he was like annoying to be around, right? Or the fact that, you know, he was the star and they were jealous. Like it's hard to say exactly what it was
yeah.
because I don't think
Because
most of it
even
ever
even
talked about it.
Even Nichelle Nichols, she had stated, like or she said that Kirk, and I think at the end of season one, Shatner had lobbied for like more scenes, like essentially cutting a lot of her scenes out, or and her stuff. So I could see it, and I'm not like gonna if Shatner had a huge ego and everything, I'm not gonna like defend the guy, um,
But also
but
too, like I think some of the blame should be on the writers. I mean, they're the ones that rewrote the scenes, right? I mean, you can
yeah,
lobby for something, but it doesn't mean you're going to get it.
well,
I,
Well, and to kind of take a to go into more like of Takai. Takai also has a bit of a lot of nerve to try to compare him to Shatner because and if anyone who isn't a fan of like the original series, if they just watch the movies, they could be like, oh, I could understand why Takai would have an issue with that. However, if you rewatch the original series, Sulu was actually of the main cast, right, in the films. Sulu had the least screen time. He he was in the people forget in the first season he wasn't a steady character. There were plenty of episodes in the first and actually second season as well where he wasn't in the episode at all. They had other helmsmen. Chekhov actually coming in at season 2 because he wasn't in season 1 at all. Chekhov actually coming in season 2 was more of a steady. character than Sulu ever was. Ahura, Nichelle Nichols, I can understand her talking about time taken away from her because
Like
she was
maybe
always
Scotty
there.
too.
Yeah, Scotty was always there, Bones was always there, Spock was always there, Kirk was always there. So like of all the people, Sulu, his character was actually of the main cast. I don't want to say he's the least important, but
He had the least amount of
he
screen time.
yeah. Chekhov had more steady screen time and he missed an entire season.
Well, that's the thing too.
So
Like in pop culture, he was always the guy on Star Trek, right? And he's got the voice. Talk about Decay or whatever his name is.
yeah,
That's what
okay.
you know. Then that's what he was always known as. Like I seen the episode in Futurama where they seem to love the guy and other like other shows. But then you go and watch the original series, like I don't remember this guy even being on the show.
That's what I'm saying. Like I remember I was watching it and I was just
Like, am I
like,
missing something? Like, why is he so famous? Like, even in the movies, he doesn't really do anything.
yeah. So listen, I get it. It's there's multiple factors in it. We weren't with the production and everything, and we obviously we weren't there involved
They're
in
all
making the
actors, they all
show.
got egos.
Yeah, but I think also Takai has a he might have thought he was a bit bigger than he actually was on the show. So listen, I get it if Shatner, you could say he was a bit full of himself, but he also was the star of the show. So the writers are going to give him more leeway. They are. He's the main, and believe me, no one is going to mistake. No one is going to say I prefer Sulu over Kirk. Kirk, him, Spock, Bones, Scotty. Ahura was always there. So if she had complaints about getting less screen, yeah, she was always there. Chekhov, he was more there. So I think it's a bit of both, where it's Kirk was probably young, Shatner, he might have been full of himself, sure, but he was the star of the show. Where Sulu was not a steady character until like the end of season two, maybe season three. The films actually kind of established him more as a core member of the group. Even like Nurse Chapel was more of a steady character than
Yeah,
Sulu.
and he was it
Human,
the Yeoman Rand or whatever her name was.
Yeoman, yeah, they brought her back, and that was something I want to talk about this film too. Is they brought back some of the older characters. Um, Human Rand, that's what her name was. She was cut after the first season, but they brought her back. But even in the first season, she had more of a steady role than Sulu. And Chapel, she was there for most of the show. She was usually there with Bones. They had more steady roles in screen time than Sulu.
I mean,
So
I was gonna say too, like there's like the other thing too, where like this is a business, right? Like actors want more screen time because they think it's gonna help their career. Sulu might be upset because, Kirk was trying to help his career, or Shatner was trying to help his career as much as he could. I mean, it's kind of how the business is, right? I mean, we're not in it, but I imagine everyone's going to be fighting for their best chance to get famous and get better roles and stuff.
yeah,
Like he wasn't the main character and he lost. I mean,
yeah. But I think at some point, like on Takai's part, it's like you got to kind of like, I guess like with like essentially what the other cast did, it was kind of like, all right, if you had your issues with him, be like, like it's at some point it's like, when does this become like an obsession and like a lifelong feud? But it seemed like Kirk never, like Shatner never acknowledged it. Like he's like, yeah, I didn't really know the guy, and after he said the point of like we were never close, like, and then when you like, because if you saw the movies, you'd be like, oh, that he's lying. But if you watch the original show, I could completely understand Shatner saying I was never close with the guy because like his schedule was not the same as Kirk's. Like one guy is always there for every episode, and the other guy's coming in here and there. You know, so I think at one point you almost have to blame a bit more, I guess, the writers too, because they're the ones giving. If Shatner is making those demands, they're giving it to him. Which again, they're trying to run a show. You're going to give it to your star. It's like a team, like football. If some scout team guy is blaming the franchise quarterback for less pay on his part, it's like, well, who's the guy that sells the tickets, gets people to come into the games? Are you going to go with with the guy that the fourth receiver that rotates in every 4 games? Or are you going to go with the quarterback that is throwing 40 touchdowns and getting fans at your game?
well, see, I think a better
You know,
comparison to call for like for using football, like Shatner's like a diva receiver, but can actually back it up.
Yeah,
Like he's like
yeah.
Odell, like his rookie first 3 years in the league,
Oh, don't get me wrong.
complete basket
Shatner
case.
definitely. I could see Shatner being a diva, especially with his overacting. He's Captain Kirk, but that's enough of that. Just I thought that was very interesting after rewatching the original series, and then diving more to that where Shatner just basically didn't acknowledge the feud.
It's funny because they're both up there in age. I'm pretty sure if Shatner were to die first, I think Sulu would probably. I don't think he'd be all that respectful. I can see Shatner being more respectful if Sulu died first.
Yeah,
He's like, yeah, whatever, man. He's a good castmate or whatever. We worked sort of together over the years. Whatever.
yeah.
And Sulu's like, good. The devil died. Eh.
Yeah, actually, Sulu should be thankful for the films because they actually gave him a bigger role and gave him more to do. Not in this one, but in the as we talk more later on in the movies, we'll get to that. Um, but yeah, that was another. We talked about they brought back a few characters from the original series. They brought Janice Rand, the human, one of Kirk's old humans, and then Christine Chapel. Um, and then they also brought back, well, they brought this actor back, but I don't know if you knew this, Craig, but Mark Leonard, who plays Sarek, he was actually the Klingon commander in the opening series, in the opening scene.
I did not notice that, but then obviously for the podcast, I saw on the Wikipedia page. It's like, oh, that's
Yeah,
it's a cool reference.
yeah. Was there, and also too, on the, and then on the James Doohan, who plays Scotty, he actually created the Klingon vocabulary in the film.
I saw that. I was kind of surprised. I figured they would have hired some professional, but I guess
So
Scotty had nothing else to do. So
Scotty essentially made the Klingon language that it is now. Because then they had like a linguistic guy come and like later, like he fully developed the language that Scotty made. So
interesting. Also, I guess one other thing that I feel like this is probably it definitely when we talk about like it feels like a continuation of the show, but except for the costumes, like, the characters do kind of look like they're fresh out of the show almost. Because when we go to Star
yeah,
Trek 2, they definitely look like they've aged more than this one. Again, they're getting older. Like you can't blame them for it. I'm saying, but this definitely looks visually, except for the costumes, more like the characters how they were in the show.
oh yeah. So final thoughts. Was there anything else with this one you wanted to discuss?
Well, I think we covered a lot. Like I said,
Yeah.
it's not like we have a lot of negatives. Like it's not that it's bad. It's just it's got its own
I,
acquired taste.
I think the best way to describe this one was disappointing and underwhelming. You could argue disappointing because, and I think it would be unfair if we didn't point this out. Um, I think maybe when the film, for fans when they first saw it, and maybe I guess we should probably disclaim or make the statement that we're probably desensitized to CGI. We no, I mean seriously, like I could understand why people like because I'd seen like people commenting on the film and like obviously have different point of views. Like some people's like this is not a Star Trek film or this is very disappointing. Then you have some people like I love this film. So I guess there's a bit of a generational gap because like people like us that grew up when CGI, you know, post like Jurassic Park and stuff where CGI really started coming into it. Like we were at that point like
We were
where
born
it
after Jurassic Park. We didn't stand a chance.
oh yeah. So but we still early in our early years we were able to catch the end of it, right? So like Lord of the Rings or Pirates of the Caribbean where there was a blend. It was before CGI completely took over. So like you have these movies that they utilize CGI but they're not overusing it where everything is an actor with a small set in front of a green screen. Where like
Like your
it's
basic
like these
Marvel
big
movie.
yeah, so there's like like where they utilize the sets and the actors and the makeup, and they use CGI when they need to, like Lord of the Rings, perfect example. and they did a great job with it. But then, once like Iron Man came out, and then Marvel kickstarted it, and like Avatar, where it was like everything just now becomes CGI. There's no like sets and stuff. So for us to like, and believe me, I was impressed by the CGI of this film, and I think it still holds up. They did a great job with the visual effects, but we've come to that point where we've watched so many films where they just try to wow the audience with, oh look, like look at what we made, and it's like that's cool, but I want to I want to watch a good movie. I want to watch a good plot. I want to watch good characters, good dialogue. So I I think for us it's a bit different than someone, say like our parents who were, they were kids when this first came out, and it's like the only other thing I guess like movies like Star Wars, like where it was kind of the birth of a new age of cinema where these visual effects now were incredible. So I can understand why someone would, someone who saw this film when it first came out would absolutely love it because it was something new. Like where when you watch the original series, they're limited, and some of the designs and stuff are like did you get that at Party City? That's a cute alien costume. Did your husband make it for you? But um, so
It was
I
also too
get
like
yeah,
I mean I know people like the
yeah,
special effects, but I did see people I guess actually like the slow because I've heard people compare it to like 2001: The Space Odyssey. I've never seen it, but people are saying they decided to copy that instead of Star Wars, which might not have been the best financial move, but that's what they went
yeah.
for.
So I just want to make that like disclaimer. Like I'm not gonna say like anyone that loved this film, like say you grew up with the film and you loved it. I'm not gonna say you're an idiot because I can understand it. It's just different for us where it's like everything's CGI now. I'm not impressed by it. So I do have to give it a pass in that regard of what they were trying to do, and because it was newer at the time, like being able to show off the Enterprise like that, it's cool. But you also have to remember Star Trek was a great show without the CGI because of the creativity behind it and the sci-fi element and all that stuff. It was awesome for different reasons, but Star Trek was always about the crew, never about, all the cool stuff. It was always in essence about the crew and the people. So, and I think that's where the main disconnect in the first film is.
Very,
So,
very well said.
so now let's go to a complete 180. The next film um, is probably and unanimously voted, at least out of the original series, the best film. And maybe you could make an argument it's maybe the best Star Trek film of all time. Star Trek II Wrath of Khan.
So good
Um,
that the franchise keeps copying it and it won't stop copying it.
yeah.
One of those things where like it's almost too good where people can't move past it.
Yeah. And this is definitely one of the fewer cases where the sequel is better than the original. It's not even close. So this one came in '82, so about 3 years after. Um, they changed directors, and they went in a completely different. I wouldn't say a completely different direction, but they went back to their roots. And the main difference, I guess, you might be able to attribute this to the they essentially after the disappointing reception of the first one, they basically stripped Gene Roddenberry of his creative freedom, and they where it was directed by Robert Weiss. They now went, was it Nicholas? Was it Meyer? Um, and he kind of took Star Trek back to where it was and what the fans loved about it, which was a great decision.
And it actually felt
Um,
like a movie this time.
yes. So, Craig, before we get into positives and negatives, if there are any, you want to explain the plot for Wrath of Khan?
So this is sort of a sequel to one of the original series episodes. I forget the name of it, but basically the episode where they find Khan Union Singh and his crew. He's basically this warlord tyrant from the 1990s, funny enough. And he exiled himself after he's regime got disposed, so he went into space. They found his crew, woke him up. He tried to take over the Enterprise to start reconquering things, but Kirk and his crew won. They defeated them, and then he exiled them onto a planet, saying that well, this is your chance, like to maybe rebuild society and try to do it better this time with your own people. Didn't work out so well because the planet. They said it got like moved or something, and the planet got
Well, yeah,
destabilized.
SETI Alpha. They
5, right?
got marooned to SETI Alpha 5, and then in this one, SETI Alpha. They thought when they went, they thought it was SETI Alpha 6. What happened was the SETI Alpha 6 blew up, and it pushed, and it basically messed up SETI Alpha 5.
Yeah, so
Um,
then he gets found by Chekhov, and he basically tries to continue what he did in the original series. He wanted to take a ship. Well, actually, I take that back. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to basically get revenge on Kirk for beating him and exiling him. Kirk has to, outmaneuver himself. There's a doomsday device that he has to stop him getting his hands on. Yeah, it's good
yeah.
stuff.
hmm And this one, this is definitely Khan. Definitely became probably the most famous Star Trek villain, like individual, I should say, because obviously with the other series, there were alien races that became famous
I mean, at least
for
in the
their
movies, because
conflicts.
I feel like
Yeah,
there are better villains in the shows, but no one actually watches those. So,
yeah. Um, but so, Craig, what did you think of Wrath of Khan?
well, I mean, people like it for a reason. It's a very good movie. I liked it a lot, but it's not my favorite actually. We'll get to that one later. Second
Yeah,
favorite though.
yeah, it's up there for me, but I do have a few other ones that I might argue are I like are my favorites for different reasons. But yeah, I no, I still enjoyed this one. I could say you might say I love it um, for all the reasons that everyone else loves it. The most of the people were um, they praised it for it kind of going back to um, the the space adventure esque of what Star Trek originally was, or the Enterprise it's on a training mission and it runs into an enemy, and now the crew is thrown into this situation. So with this one, like I'd said before, so this retconned a few things. Um, the time the time between them because Khan said that it had been 15 years since Kirk marooned him.
Yeah, I think
So
it was.
this
I don't think that was right because I'm looking at the Wikipedia right now. I think the number's a bit off, but whatever.
this is where this was their attempt to retcon the timelines because one of the things was they felt like the new writers and everything and director, they felt that it would not it would have they felt like the audience wouldn't have believed that the way the actors had aged and everything, like, and the time difference, like people wouldn't be able to believe that this was just 3 years or 5 years after the original series, that this was like 10 years, that it would be more realistic if you aged the story with the actors, so like 10 years. So this is where they get that time jump, where they wanted to make it more like, yeah, this was 10 years since the original series, like, and the actors kind of more reflect that, and I think that too makes more sense with like Kirk becoming admiral, and like everyone's ranking going up that much, because in 10 years that makes more sense than like 3 years, like Kirk jumping to like admiral and stuff, like,
Yeah, where was other rankings that he skipped over?
yeah, yeah, and also too, like, and I do want to note everyone for the most part looked good for their age. I guess the one that really kind of throws off is Scotty, because he looked like he aged the most.
Yeah, he also got a
Um,
little fat.
yeah, and also his hair, like, completely, like, he went just full, like, almost like full gray and everything.
Yeah, because in the motion
So
picture, it was starting to gray, but now it's like, yeah, like I said, full gray.
yeah, yeah. So this series they retcon that, um, that now the timeline is completely different, which I think fits better. And then also too, I don't know if you noticed this, Craig, but another thing they retconned, um, Chekhov and Khan.
Ugh.
So Khan and Chekhov recognize each other. Again, Khan was in season at the I think episode like he was at the tail end of like season one. Chekhov wasn't on the show yet. So how Chekhov recognized Khan and more important all right, so I can understand Chekhov knowing about Khan, right? Kirk and them over the years talked about it. That's fine. But Khan recognizing Chekhov by face, he says, I never thought I'd see you again. That was a little weird. And I looked into this, like, how they might have, like, done this or, like, what was the explanation. And some of the explanations was like, one of them I thought was funny was Chekhov was on night shift. So he just wasn't like they didn't show him during the episode, but he was on the crew. He just wasn't there, or he was transferred away. But I'm like, it's a little. To me, it was more of just like a quick thing. Like you just didn't have to include it. Like I think it would have been a bit better too if Chekhov didn't know who Khan was. You know, but
I mean, it's
it
something
was
that never
just a little.
really bothered me because I did see that
Yeah,
like after I saw the movie, like yeah, he actually wasn't in the episode, but it's not a big deal.
yeah. But it was just it was a little something. I was like, you could have just write you could have just written it where they don't recognize him, or you could have just sent a Hora or someone else from the original crew so he recognized them. But it's whatever. Um, yeah, but yeah. So with positives on the film, what were some of the positives you found?
Well, since this is an actual movie, there's like actual like themes and stuff. Like this is about like Kirk, getting older, dealing with age, dealing with death. It's like an actual movie. Because the last one
Yeah.
again, it was like nothing. It was just this thing coming to Earth.
Yeah, and that's something too that the first one deeply missed. That this one hit on the head was the interpersonal interactions. The scenes where whether it was Kirk and Bones in the beginning, where it was Kirk's birthday and Bones shows up, and he gets him a drink, and then he gets him the glasses, which I thought was funny. Um, and they're having
Spectacles.
this yeah, and but they there's the humor in it, like him bringing over the Romulan ale, which is illegal, and him getting them glasses, it's sentimental because, and what Star Trek does is it's a blend of like the quips between each other, but it's layered then over the sentimental between the relationships between the characters where Spock and Bones have, not Spock and Bones, Kirk and Bones have this inner, dialogue where Bones gets it out of Jim. Jim is talking about how he feels old, and how I guess we should preface it too is in this one, Kirk and Spock. Spock is actually a captain, and he's training a crew, which is where you bring in the famous Kobayashi Maru test with Lieutenant Savick, and her crew, where Spock is training them to then that they can take he'll take actually control of the Enterprise and train them on it. Kirk is now in an admiral position where he's just overseeing the training process of the cadets. So
Like that's why he's feeling old
Kirk,
too. Like he's not part of the action anymore. He's watching everybody.
yeah.
Like you feel like
So
he's past his prime.
yeah, he's torn in the spot where he wants to accept where he is, but he can't, um, because he in the essence of Kirk is always the Enterprise. Like he would never give up the ship. And if you watch the original series, even when he was stranded on a planet, he would always, multiple times he'd say, "You get the ship out of there. You do not lose the Enterprise." He would die before he gave up the Enterprise. He was a he was a captain to that sense. He loved the ship. Um, so
No woman could
Kirk
pull
is
him away
having,
from that ship.
yeah,
Not even his
and
wife in
that's
the
not,
movie.
yeah, that's another thing too. So Kirk is at this point, he doesn't know what to do, and Bones gives him the advice, as a friend and as his doctor, get command again. So Kirk goes along with Spock. Well, Spock has him oversee it. The crew, Lieutenant Savick, and her crew, when Spock takes him onto the Enterprise for a 3-week training exercise, I believe. Um, and he's just overseeing. But you could tell he's kind of struggling with it. And Bone, so the crew goes, the original crew goes with them. Well, actually, um, Horror was there too. Scotty was there obviously to oversee it, train with them. So they're training them all. So
You
it's kind of a
forgot
cool thing.
Sulu
You see.
again.
Oh, my bad, my bad. Again, he could have been replaced by the young cadet helmsman, and it would. But yeah, uh, so it was interesting, like that. With this film, that again they actually dive into those themes. They actually make it memorable. It's not just like it feels like the Enterprise is like they're like plot devices just so we could watch shots of the Enterprise. And then also because too him and Spock have that dialogue as well. You know, where Spock also gives him advice to get back command of the ship, like as his friend, and that's where he says, I have been and always shall be your friend. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and everything. So, um, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But I guess the point I was making is that in this one, they actually dive into the characters and they feel like the original characters, and they explore that. So, and then you have all that where Kirk is having these personal conflicts, and you bring it on this younger gen, and like you think the crew is like they're past that point, and then Khan comes in with the Reliant after he took control with what was that captain's name that Chekhov was with?
I honestly don't remember. Was he even given a name?
It was
I don't remember. I just remember he was the captain of the Reliant.
oh,
And then he killed
Terrell.
himself.
Terrell. Yeah, Terrell. Um so what happens, Khan, he goes he goes to that space station, Regula,
Irregular
where
one.
Kirk's old lover, Carol Marcus, and her son,
We do not have to get basically
David
naked for the movie. I'm just gonna say.
What?
She didn't have to get like basically stripped down to her underwear for the movie to make herself interesting.
Yeah. um, she's with her son. They're working on that. They're working on Project Genesis, which is Starfleet's like science. They're working on essentially creating planets out of nothing.
Or like terraforming planets, like
Yeah,
what would
dead.
Bone
Yeah,
say?
like dead
Like,
planets, like asteroids that they could make habitable planets to basically solve like intergalactic. I can't say
oh,
like war
population,
hunger.
whatever.
Yeah,
Like,
they
I
can
think
solve
Bones said
population.
like God made Earth in 7 days. Genesis can do it in like an hour or something.
Yeah, it was like
Like,
almost like an infomercial. We could do it in 6 minutes. Um, so yeah, so they're doing that. They're and Khan gets wind of it because
he's like a super
he
weapon to unleash on Earth.
yeah. Um, so he takes control of the station, and he gets Chekhov to lie because of those the SETI eels. Like he has Chekhov under mind control to basically tell them like, oh, Kirk approved. Like we're taking Genesis from you. Um, Yada yada yada. And then they come over and they basically they don't get Genesis because like Carol Marcus and David Marcus and the scientists, they put themselves onto I forget the name of the like that planetoid
They
they
beam
went
into
to,
like
like the
the
Arctic.
asteroid where they were already practicing their terraforming.
Yeah. Um, so um, yeah, but and then Kirk, he gets wind of she sends a distress, not a distress, but she like messages Kirk like, "What are you doing?" Yada yada, frame. So Kirk goes with the crew, the training crew, to see like what's going on, and that's where he runs into Khan, and this is where like like they actually show the intelligence of Khan, like he's able to come up with this plan, and he has the inferior ship to Kirk with the Reliant, and
Initially,
he
yeah.
actually yeah, and he's able to actually disable the Enterprise. And I guess that's something too missed with like the difference between the Wrath of Khan and Into Darkness is it's not the way to show off someone's uh, superior intellect is to put them at a disadvantage originally, like or put them at in like a fight, put them at a disadvantage, and they outthink the other guy. Not he gets a bigger and better and blacker ship and he overpowers him straight up. Like this is where they actually show Khan's intellect of him actually outsmarting Kirk. I mean, granted, Kirk hasn't seen the guy in 15 years and didn't really, kind of didn't really, remember it, or he forgot about it. Like
Well, also it's like
Khan,
actual intelligence. Not like in the Marvel movies where their intelligence is basically like magic. Oh, I just
yeah,
figured out time travel in like 2 hours. I'm like, okay. I mean, that's how dumb people think smart people are. They're like
yeah,
wizards,
because
you know.
even so Khan he cripples, and I love the scene um where Kirk, Khan disables Kirk's ship, and then he hails Kirk, and um, Kirk then it's to realize, he sees Khan for the first time, and like Kirk, I just love Shatner looks at Khan. Um, I also love the way too that I love like Khan, who's played by the original actor Ricardo Montalban.
Yeah, especially playing
Um,
some Indian or Sikh or someone from the Indian subcontinent, but he's clearly Mexican.
yeah, he's from Mexico. Uh, Yeah, I just love his act, like the way he'll be like admiral. The way he'd always say admiral, like he
He
just
even
kept
had the
saying it.
accent.
Oh yeah, no, that was great. Especially too like when Chekhov, like when he was asking about Kirk when he initially captured Chekhov, and he's like Admiral Kirk, and he like looks at him, he's like Admiral, like he was so detested that Kirk got promoted. Like I just love the pure hatred that he has for him.
Well, because he was like the
Um,
one person that was able to best him more than once.
Yeah. And the best part is he bested him by he pulled out like a panel and just beat him down with it.
Yeah, in the original
Like
episode.
in the original episode, Khan's like bragging about his strength, his superior strength, like he's 5 times his strength, and Kirk just pulls out like essentially like a crowbar and just beats him down.
Yeah, I think it was like he said the strength of 10 men
Yeah.
beat with a
Yeah, he just
crowbar.
kept yeah, Kirk just pulls something out of a panel and beats him down with it. But yeah,
Classic.
so definitely one of the highlights of the film was Montalban's portrayal of Khan. Um, he to me he looked like he was just having such a fun time with the role. And his conviction, like his portrayal of Khan, I like because um, it's definitely like I feel like it's become a formula for like villains and like good villains, where he has this kind of like charismatic, poetic way about him. Um, maybe not charismatic. He has this charm to him. Like the way he talks is very polite. He
He's
like
well read, well
he
spoken.
yeah, exactly, and like yeah, especially when he sees Kirk and Kirk's like Connie goes, he's like, "Oh, you remember me, Admiral. I'm so touched." Like, what I mean? Like he has such a hatred for him that, but it's he doesn't show it in like the angry yelling way of like Into Darkness where Khan just yelling and crushing people's heads. It's like, you
He
know,
just had like some creepy board like he had for Kirk like all these years, like having like finding newspaper clippings and tying it to the board.
yeah. So, which was definitely one of the positives of the film that fans absolutely they loved Khan, and the portrayal of him, which I have to agree. Like he was great, personality wise, and also like, um, And and I think this is, the thing with two of like Khan, his hatred for Kirk blinded him and allowed his error of ways, where it allowed Kirk to slip in and outsmart him, um, especially to when when he maroons Kirk onto the heart of that planetoid, um, and everything. But
I always feel like
that scene.
oh.
Go ahead.
No, because like you're talking about like how he's a good villain. Like I always find like good villains. Like it's not a bad thing to copy like Moby Dick. 'Cause I tend to like villains who are like just so driven by like their hatred of something. Like they got to get the whale. Like he's got to get Kirk no matter what. Because even in the movie, like his second command goes like, "Why are we still pursuing Kirk? We have a ship. We can literally do whatever we want." It's like, "No, I got to get Kirk."
Yeah. Well, yeah, because when they first took the Reliant and they had, and they're like, oh, like he didn't even want to go after Genesis, the his second in command. He's like, we have a ship, we can go anywhere. Like we don't need to go get stuck in our path. Like, and that's one of the themes of like your past catching up to you. Um, but I always love that scene too, where Khan gives Kirk 60 seconds to hand over Genesis and himself, and then Kirk, they where you see how calm. Well, one, the thing about like this is like, I guess, I know some people could argue like, oh, they didn't make Khan too smart. So I think the thing too is Khan is intellect is he is superior genetically. But the thing is where Kirk beats him here is because Kirk has the experience. And Spock makes that reference too, where he's highly intelligent, but he's not experienced in this field. So it kind of evens the playing field with them. And
Yeah,
that's where
that's
Kirk,
like again, like in movies, people think like someone like Iron Man can, become an expert on something, immediately. Like that's not really how it works. Like even smart people need practice, need to read and learn. Like it's not
yeah,
you don't just absorb things like
yeah.
I don't know,
Like,
supercomputer.
and they perfectly show that where Kirk knows about the code to for the other ship. Like to he immediately knows, him and Spock know to look up the other code for the ship. Like that's experience, knowing that information. Where Khan is like, I have you paralyzed, you're dead, and I have you dead to rights. And Kirk is like, okay, and Kirk also plays on Khan, taunting him, where he then is like, all right, I'll take the, giving him the time, and he's like, please, we need the time, or ship, like he's like pleading with him,
Badly
and
damaged.
then yeah, and then then he has them enter the code. He lowers the shields and cripples the Reliant enough so that they could get to Regula and see what's happening. So like, that's where like this film, and like where in the first one misses it too, of like a good villain, of like them having to, it's like the battle of wits. Like I know we talked about this. Like one of my favorite episodes from the original series was the first episode with the Romulans. Um, and that Romulan commander, where him and Kirk are in the neutral zone playing essentially a game of chicken. Like they're going back and over the lines, they're trying to outmaneuver each other. It's
Like
just a
who's gonna
battle
take the
of
bait? Who's gonna
wits.
shoot first? Who's gonna make the
Yeah.
mistake?
Yeah. And Kirk outwits him. So like, that was something definitely missing in the first one. That this one, and then you bring back Khan, a superior opponent. That the crew, it's not just Kirk, but the crew has to work together to outsmart him. Um, and then and then another element that they brought back too was like, so Kirk, Bones, and Savick, they go down to the planet. They locate where Carol Marcus and David Marcus, who is Kirk's son from affair that they had, him and Carol had
I
a
thought they were
while ago.
married, weren't they? Or
No, I don't think they were ever married.
I thought they were married, but they said didn't work out or something.
No, they were lovers.
I thought she didn't take his name, but it doesn't matter.
I I was always under the impression that they were lovers, and they had the kid, and Kirk. They eventually, both of them were drawn to their careers, and they couldn't. So they just mutually parted. Kirk stayed away, as Carol just she wanted to raise the son and everything. Um, so and David doesn't know that Kirk is his father yet. He just knows that Kirk was a past lover of hers. So they locate them in the heart of the planet, Bones, Kirk, and Savick, and um, and this was and I thought this was a neat little move by Khan. Like he had this trick up his sleeve where he secretly Chekhov and that captain were always under his mind control. He just planted them there because they like when they went into the they went to the initial base. They found Chekhov and them. They thought they were fine. They bring them. Oh, they bring Chekhov and the captain with them down to the planet, and then Khan had been listening in the whole time, and he had them there. And so Khan, he wants him to kill Kirk, and they get the Genesis device, but the captain kills himself. He was able to fight off the mine thing, and then Chekhov was able to fight it out in the that little the set of eel that came out of his ear, um, and so now and then that's where the famous buried alive. Khan. You gotta love Shatner's overacting. Um, so they get left there, right, and they think they're done because Kirk, um, Kirk over the channel, him and Spock were talking. Spock said, you know, um, it's gonna take 6 days and to repair the ship, and Kirk said just to leave, So Khan is under the impression that they're gone because Kirk said buy the book. You can't, you got to just leave. Get out of there. Go alert Starfleet and everything. And so Kirk and them are now trapped. Khan thinks he has Kirk marooned on the planet. He's gonna, then he's gonna go for the Enterprise, whatever. Um, and it leads to one of my favorite scenes, which I think captures the essence of Kirk as well as the crew, because the whole thing about the Kobayashi Maru and um was it's essentially a no-win scenario that they put cadets cadet crew through, especially more for the captain's psyche, that how would they handle the face of, in the face of certain death? Your crew's done, your ship's going down. Do you hold your composure in the face of it?
Yeah,
And how do you handle
what
yourself?
decisions do you make?
Yeah. And the test was not originally designed by Spock. I don't know why they put that in the new series, like in like the J.J. Abrams films. It wasn't
Especially,
designed
he
by
wasn't
him.
even a captain at that point. Like, why would he design a test for
Yeah.
captains?
Yeah, he was also a captain when he was however old as a Vulcan. He wasn't a captain being the same age as Kirk. Kirk was a higher rank than him. um, but so and that was the thing of like Savick takes the test in the beginning, and she was mad that she didn't like handle herself the best way. She earlier in the film, like she asked Kirk, how did he handle it? Because Kirk took it 3 times, and Kirk dropped the hint, like I had one approach to it, and they kind of liked it, um, and so they're trapped in the planet. Everyone's kind of upset except like Bones and Kirk. Kirk is just sitting there with Bones, and they're talking, and Savick comes up and she asks him, how did you face it? And that's when Bones goes, Cadet, you're looking at the only Starfleet. No, Lieutenant, you're looking at the only Starfleet cadet that ever beat the Kobayashi Maru. And she's like, how? He goes, I reprogrammed the simulation so it was available that I could rescue the ship. And she's like, what? He's like, and then that's what Dave's like, he cheated. And he goes, I changed the conditions of the test. I got the combination for original thinking. But and that's where he says Kirk was like, I don't like to lose, and she's like, oh, so you never face death, and he's like, I don't believe in the no one scenario. And like that's the essence of Kirk, and and then right after that he immediately hails Spock and is like, it's been 2 hours. Are you ready? And like Spock's like, right on schedule, Admiral. And like I just love the look that he gives Savick as he gets into like eats the apple. I was like, I don't like to lose. Like I was like, it's the most Kirk moment possible. But again, like that
He's a smart
that is like
character, very determined.
yes. and I don't want to harp on where the other films went wrong, but that's Kirk. Yes, he's a he's willing to take risks. Yes, he may be a bit of a hot shot at times, but he never lets his ego like it's never like it's not like how in the '09 and Into Darkness was where he's just like running around and just like a gunslinger. Like he always had a trick up his sleeve, and that's where I love like him and Khan going back and forth. Where like Khan thinks he marooned him, but Kirk already had a plan in motion. And the crew, like, they're divided, but they still work together to get back. And especially because Khan's reaction when, like, Kirk, like, he sees Kirk is still alive. But yeah, that was like that's one of my favorite scenes ever. Though was when they're trapped and Kirk is talking about that, and then um, and then she also is like, and then he reads her the regulation, and like no uncoded messages over a channel that may be monitored by the enemy. And she looks at Spock. You lied. He goes, I exaggerated. Like even he willing to you know. So, but
But
that
it's helping her to like realize that obviously there are rules, but you got to know when to read between the lines, so to speak, and figure out a way out of tough scenarios, like what Kirk does.
yeah, and that's where I think like these scenes are what Star Trek is about, right? It's about the people. It's not about the big. It's not about the. Listen, the ships are awesome, and the Enterprise design. I love
Yes.
it, and there's no denying that. Especially like when you get into Deep Space Nine and like I'm sure in like Next Generation and the other shows, like when you get into those interplanetary wars and like those some of those scenes, like in Deep Space Nine, like when the Dominion assault, the space station, and they're fighting them back. I love those scenes, but Star Trek is
And they
about the
retake it.
people. What?
And also the episode where they retake it.
Yeah, those are great. Those are great things about Star Trek, and I absolutely love them. But it's also comes down to the crew. Like, and I love like these scenes, like where it's just a battle of the minds between Kirk and Khan, and they have to outsmart them. It's not about having the bigger, badder ship. It's just who can make the better moves in chess, so to speak.
Oh yeah,
But
like that's like the final conflict where they chased him into that nebula where all their like targeting systems were taken out. They mentioned that because he's new to space fighting, he's only
yeah,
thinking this in the two D dimensional space, while spaceships are in 3 dimensions. So again,
yeah,
exploiting his inexperience, which again I
and
think
also
is
yeah,
clever because again like in I like to pick on the J.J. Abrams movies because in those movies it's just well who's got the bigger gun. This is well we don't have the bigger gun but we can outsmart you.
yeah. Because the Enterprise was in still in worse shape than the Reliant, even though they were able to damage it to just ward him off enough time. And Kirk also is playing on Khan's hatred for him too. He knows how to use that as a weapon against him. Because then
Yeah.
he starts taunting him. Like Khan initially was not going to follow Kirk into the nebula, or he wasn't originally going to follow the Enterprise into the nebula. He originally was going to. He listened to his second in command finally, and then Kirk gets on the comm and starts taunting Khan, and Khan didn't realize Kirk got back. So immediately he starts taunting him, and then Khan's like full speed ahead. We're getting them.
I'm gonna get
So
my whale.
yeah, and he does quote Moby Dick at the end,
Oh yeah, like it wasn't
but and
obvious enough for
yeah,
people who
yeah,
don't read anymore.
I know I can't, but and then the Nebula scene was great because it's just again it's just like a game of cat and mouse. They're moving. Both ships are able to line each other up at points, but they both miss the firing because they don't have the lock on system. And then Kirk makes the move to just drop, just to lower the ship because he anticipates Khan is gonna essentially he's just going in a circle. So Kirk is like, well, instead of just going in a circle with him, drop the ship, just go lower and then wait. And then they sat and they waited till Khan actually got ahead of them, and then they came up behind him, which I love that scene too. And we didn't touch on the from the first one, which they continue into this one, is the updated theme song soundtrack for it.
Yeah, because
It was
that's
a little more like it was more upbeat.
Because
which
I know
I did
people
like
probably
it
think of it as the Next Generation
original.
theme. Because that's what they use like
Yeah,
the opening of the series or the
yeah.
title crawl, whatever. But
But that was something too from the first one. I admit I did like. I did like the updated theme that they gave it. It was more upbeat and a little more fun. They carried into this one, and that was like when the Enterprise slowly rises behind the Reliant, and like the theme picks up, and like and they
fire.
get the torpedoes, fire. Um, that was such a great scene. I could imagine being in the theater and people just like watching this live, just start clapping, like
Oh
just
God.
erupt. Yeah,
Those are the people we
throwing
always get
pop.
in theaters. They'll clap at anything or cry
Yeah,
at anything, apparently.
throw popcorn on you. Um, but that was a great scene. Like they they get behind him and then they take out his ship. But I
But then,
think in that, but what happened, and then what happens is Khan again has one more trick up his sleeve where he's going to detonate the Genesis device because Kirk completely leveled his ship and they're gonna die. So Khan, in his last act to try to get Kirk, detonates the Genesis device, which they're the Enterprise isn't going to be able to get out in time unless they get the warp going. So and that's
most famous
where
probably seen all of Star Trek history.
100%, and it was definitely something to like. I could like I couldn't imagine being a diehard fan and watching the scene when it first came out and not being like, "There's no way, there's no way this is happening." So as they cripple the ship, Khan's going to detonate the device. They're not going to get out in time, and they can't get into the warp because the radiation is too much. Like Scotty passes out over the comm just talking about it. Bones is down there treating everyone, and Spock, he goes down, and because of his Vulcan physiology, physiology,
But also,
yeah,
like, it was logical.
yeah. But this is the thing of like Spock like making having it shows this human side where the emotion of like being willing to sacrifice, but it's logical, you know.
Like, how it was just
But
to hide things. Like, he loves, he likes Kirk and stuff and the crew.
oh yeah, Jim. But so he goes down and Bones tries to stop him from going in. And I love that line of like, "Are you out of your Vulcan mind? No human can withstand that." As you're always so quick to point out, Doctor, I am not human.
Or I'm only half Vulcan.
Yeah. And then so then he tricks Bones. He's like, "Very well, like what's the condition, Mr. Scott?" Does the Vulcan neck grip, knocks him out, and he does the remember thing. Uh, and then he goes in and fixes the warp, but at the cost of his life because the radiation still is too much even for him. He was just able to withstand it long enough. They escape, and then they hail Kirk to come down to talk to see Spock, and I love like Kirk and them like Kirk looks over like immediately at the chair and just like he bolts out of there,
He knew.
and then definitely the most heartbreaking scene of any Star Trek film. Even I, who didn't grow up with the original series, like when you watch, you're like, damn, because it again, like it was like you know it was unexpected, definitely, and I give them props for going into it. And actually, this was one of the reasons Nimoy came back for the sequel because Spock was going to get the death scene, this dramatic death scene, and then him and Shatner. Say what you want about Shatner's overacting, but he completely nailed this scene. You know, where it's he did such a good job where it's like he's just like the disbelief that like one that Spock would do this, but also like you see like they don't always show like because the thing with Star Trek like too with the emotion between it's like they it's the fine line of all right like keeping your line with your ranks and keeping that professional um respectable way about being like in the military like work being being in the Navy like you have to keep that fine line of your composure but also these are your comrades like showing the love for them but also, keeping that fine line. So they did a great job with that. Um, so like somehow, it's Star Trek does it more in like kind of subtle ways, like in the dialogue and those interpersonal scenes of you see their true friendship for each other, and that they genuinely all do love each other. And then it was like, um, to see Spock die of all the people too, because he, as a Vulcan, for him to do the emotional thing of self-sacrifice for your crew is the most, emotional thing you could do. It's the greatest expression of love is to lay down your life for others.
I was gonna say that
Um,
actually.
yeah. So, and that's where, and then he when him and Kirk have the scene of, and then Spock says, "I have been and always shall be your friend." Like, and so that's where it's like, Spock, even though he's a Vulcan, he shows the emotion and love in other ways. It's
Like,
not him. It's not him losing his composure or crying unnecessarily in into darkness when they haven't even developed that level of friendship or been together nearly that long. Like these guys have been together for at this point over 15 years together.
probably more. I think at least
Oh,
20.
definitely, definitely. Because the original series takes place, they're already established crew.
Yeah,
So it's probably
it
20
also include like the
years.
5-year mission.
Yeah. So these guys have been not only working together, but friends for 20 years. Like, and, and Spock, for a Vulcan to say, like, you're my friend, like, sure, it's not the same way a human would say it or, he would show it. But that means a lot because the Vulcans are very upfront about things. They don't lie. They might exaggerate, as Spock did, but they don't lie and stuff. So, it truly, and I just can imagine like being a fan at the first time and like Spock's dead. Like there's no way. Like they like and and this is where like too I wanted to make the point of like this movie, like you don't have to be a Star Trek fan. I feel like you don't have to be a Star Trek fan and enjoy this film. Like
Oh,
this
not at
movie is
all.
just it's just a good movie. And I think the writing in this movie, which obviously if you watch the whole series, we'll get into the other movies like with his death and everything. But at the time, right, there was no plan for an entire film series. I don't believe like it was just a sequel at the time. So like, and and this is just good writing, and I feel like especially in like Marvel movies and all these big franchises, something that's lost in these films is consequence of action. Like,
It's funny to say because I was going to say like the only my negative about this death scene is that like, when I watched you, I knew Spock wasn't dead. I mean, it's sad, but like the next movie's called The Search for Spock. Like if you're watching this now, it's like I don't think it hits as hard because he comes
yeah,
back immediately. But I know it's the point you're getting to.
yeah. But initially at the time, right? Because I don't think they planned for 6 movies, right? It was just the sequel, and just to like kind of make up for the disappointment of the first one. So like, and that's the thing too is like in this film, and it's definitely something lost with all films now or most films, like all these big blockbusters and franchises. There seems to never be like a consequence for action anymore. It's like everything always works out. And and that's where you lose good character or character arcs, is that these characters, or in better shows, like characters actually have to live with their consequences, right? Kirk's, you could call it a mistake, that he let Khan live. Now 15 years later it's coming back to him, right? And then Spock dies, so it's like, and it plays into the theme of like Kirk, like the your past mistakes catching up to you, like so it was something too, like I was like, that was such a big gamble for them to take, especially because you're killing off Spock.
Who was like one of like him and Kirk are the faces of the franchise. Like you're killing
Yeah,
off like 50% of it, the face of it.
yeah. But I just thought like that was such a good, like that's just like that's good writing, is because like you know like there are consequences to their actions. And I think too, like that's something like especially in Into Darkness, right? And like in the J.J. Abrams films, like there was no consequences for Kirk's actions. Like
I mean,
it's like
did he get demoted but like got the ship back like immediately?
yeah, he got
In
he got
like 10
Spock to
minutes.
lose. Yeah, he got marooned. He got exiled, and then he got Spock to, and then he meets Scotty. They're able to figure out trans warp,
No, no, I
and
meant in the
then
second one, where like I think the beginning of it, he gets he gets this his ship taken away from him. Khan shows up, kills a bunch of people, and was like, "Okay, Kirk, ship's back. You got it again." Like,
yeah,
didn't even like learn his lesson.
and then Kirk dies, and then the cutscene they use Khan's super blood, and he's back. Like what? At least like in this one, like and then you get in the search for Spock, they spent an entire movie getting him back, and it's not even like fully him back. It's like he
Well, yeah,
still
it's
has to
also like the
learn.
traditional way of like they didn't really cheat death. They actually like literally almost cloned him.
Yeah.
I got to that later, but like yeah, it's a little bit different.
But again, they spent, and then even in like search, the voyage home, like Spock is still like regaining himself. Like it's like a course of like two movies that he like before he's fully back. But again, like this one, like and there's actually a consequence for the action. Like it's they have to, and then moving forward, it's like Kirk. It's like where does Kirk go now? Right before knowing like the next movie, it's like where does he like he just lost his best friend. You know he now he's also like his son now is in his life, you know, and stuff. So it's like all this stuff is happening, and it's like you know, and that's like kind of like, and that's where like this one comparing this one to like the first one is like there was none of this in the first one. Like they didn't necessarily feel like their characters. They felt like it was just like, oh, it's just this is the crew. Look how cool the ship is, and that's that. Like this one, it's like there's a present threat. He's coming quick. He intercepts them. It's like then they're dealing with their past and stuff, and it felt like a Star Trek film. It felt, and it was like, and also too, we didn't touch on it, but the costumes back
Yeah,
to
so
like
much
what
better.
they yeah. I kind of like the revamped look. Like they look, sure it wasn't like the coloring was different, but they I think they had badges to like on their uniform. I did like the new uniforms,
I
but
mean,
I think they had like
I
they had
liked it, but it's
badges
not
to
my
like
favorite.
indicate.
I
Yeah.
think we have the same favorite one.
Oh yeah.
Deep
And
Space Nine.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
But but they still had badges and stuff, but they look professional. And I thought um how they handled the death of Spock was good too, like sending him off, and like I liked when they had Scotty playing Amazing Grace on the bagpipes, and one of my favorite with Shatner, um he throws the human out the side of his mouth.
Human.
He's like of all the souls I had, this was the most like twitching those human.
See, like I know it's supposed to be emotional, but like just watching Shatner act, I always get like it makes me laugh sometimes, which I know that the reaction you're supposed to get. It's not like his fault entirely. It's just what he does things. I can't help but laugh.
Yeah.
This is the most human.
Yeah. Um so yeah, I the um yeah, I mean the I'm trying to think, do I like have any negatives really towards the film? Hmm.
Like I said, my only negative is the fact that it was so good that people won't stop copying it, like pulling scenes or pulling quotes
Yeah.
from it, like in other Star Trek movies. Again, not that that's really the movie's fault, but
Yeah.
it's almost too good for its own sake.
Yeah. And yeah, and I mean at least like um and I'm trying yeah, like now because now that like revenge story has become so tiresome in films because of this. Like
Well, I don't mean
like
Revenge. I
that
mean like other Star Trek like
yeah.
adaptations. Like not so much the shows in like the 80s and 90s or even Enterprise. I'm talking about like the new Trek. Like ever since the J.J. Abrams took over and his
Yeah.
disgusting tentacles all over the franchise. Like they can't help but like want to pull it because it's the most famous movie. It's got the most famous scenes. So of course they're gonna be pulling from this nonstop.
Yeah.
Again, not the movie's fault, but like it's just I feel like I've seen this movie more than I have because of all the stuff always copying it.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I really don't have any. I don't really have any negatives for this one. It's a classic for a reason, and
Mhm.
that's a testament to it. Where you know it's a good film when you don't have to be an actual fan of the series to enjoy it. Like that, like it just has good writing, a good and the biggest difference between this one and the other one was pacing. This one was so well paced. Like nothing ever felt too long. Like even Spock's death scene, like if they wanted to drag that out, I would have been like fine. But that even itself, they didn't even like drag out. Him and Kirk have their meaningful dialogue. It's short, it's precise and concise to the point, and like nothing felt drawn out. Like they don't wait too long. Like Genesis, it's like, all right, we have this device. Kirk and them, they're having their problems. There's this new gen, and there was a lot going on, and they were able to maneuver and fit everything. Nothing felt useless in the plot at
Yeah.
all. Like everything served a purpose, and that's a testament to good writing where everything serves its purpose. Genesis, Kirk's past love, plus now his son, you know, um, Khan coming back and everything. Um, there everything just fit. It flowed. It fit, and it just it was just it's a classic for a reason. There's nothing else really to say. Like, and that's why you know
Easily the
the
best sci-fi movie that came out in between the years 1980 and 1982. Or
yes,
1983, I should say.
I will take I yeah I will take this over any Star Wars film. I could match this up against a lot of good films, you know, but I think this one, especially coming out right after the first one, was huge. Um, and they're so polar opposite. Like it's crazy, like how they
Because
were.
that was the boring, you know, hard sci-fi. This is more not really sci-fi as much, more of like a about the characters and more of like an adventure-ish kind of movie.
It felt more like Star Trek. So
I guess that could be the only real negative. Like maybe not as much sci-fi in this. Because it's really more of like a personal story, personal conflict.
yeah,
The other one, again, that's like hard sci-fi. This one's like the opposite.
but I think too, but a lot, but and that's where like Star Trek, it's not all just the sci-fi. Like I mean, if you go back on the original series, like there's plenty of episodes where like there's minimal like sci-fi stuff to it.
Yeah, but I feel like
Like
again, that's like when you have like a TV show that's 20
yeah,
or so episodes long, you can like do
yeah,
different kinds of episodes. Like I guess you could say a movie's harder because like some episodes, like you said, are more character, some are more action. What do you do for a movie? Or more hard
yeah,
sci-fi? Like what do you do for a movie? How do you combine those elements
yeah.
well? I mean, it's kind of you're probably missing something that some fan likes
The
more of than the
only
other stuff they put in the movie.
even looking at like the wiki, like they said the only negative reactions focused on weak special effects. I don't really know where that would be. I
I wonder
can't
too,
like
because
think of it.
like other movies that came out, like Star Wars, were I guess flashier. This really wasn't flashy, but it
Yeah,
looks
but the
fine.
characters are so much better. Like, and it's not like the special effects in this were garbage. Like, I'm trying to think of scenes like where they thought the special effect maybe like the I honestly don't think because like even the eel, like when they put the eels in the ears like that, I thought that was pretty well done. Like even the ship in I'm trying to think of the ship battle in the nebula was great. I'm also trying to think like where the weak special effects were for this. Sure, it's not as drawn out and big, but again, like for this one, because they were like so afraid of the first one, right, of focusing too much on the visual effects, they had a lower budget, so they couldn't, you know, put as much money into the visual effects, but they still did. I thought they did a great job with it, especially the Genesis scene too. Like when they show the work of it, like, and then they show the planet forming at the end. Like I thought that was all done very well. I'm trying to think of like, I guess maybe they're nitpicking because the film was just that good. And they also said like the negative and some of the acting. I'm trying to think. The acting was some of the most classic. I guess maybe Khan or like, but I'm trying to think of like all the acting. Like what they. It's not like they gave like a specific reason
Yeah,
because
I mean,
it's funny. They said the critical reaction to the film was positive. Reviewers highlighted Khan's character, obviously Meyer's direction, improved performances. So that's kind of a catch-22. How can you praise the performances and say some of the acting? The film's pacing and the character interactions as strong elements. So at that point, it seems like people were just nitpicking. Like it's one of those things maybe where it's like if you were like to review something and it's so good, it's like you have to like all right, you got to give some negative, but
yeah, like all
but
the
yeah,
something
but
stupid like the book was too short or something. Like if it's
yeah.
good, it's good.
But yeah, I think that's we've said enough on it. It's the first two again. The first one, Star Trek: The Motionless Picture, if you want to call it, is not a bad movie. It's enjoyable. It's just disappointing on what they tried to do and
Yeah,
failed.
it's kind of
And
have your expectations of what it is going in.
yeah, yeah. And then flip over to Wrath of Khan, classic for a reason. Um, yeah, and then which kickstarts, I think, probably another a very good set of films in the series. I liked. So, but anything else, Craig?
No, I think we covered a lot. I mean, like I said, it's a classic for a reason.
And we
Go
will
watch it.
be, yep, and we will be continuing our Trekkie our Star Trek movies next week with Search for Spock and The Voyage Home. This has been the Unbiased Opinion, where everyone's opinion is biased except ours. I've been Daniel.
I've been Craig, and Colin's dead,
And
so don't worry about him.
yeah, we'll just worry about Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, and Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home when we talk about it next week.
Yep.